Welcome to the Chocolate Cake Bites podcast. This is a podcast where we will discuss these sweet nuggets of goodness come from living the gospel of Jesus Christ. I'm your host, Ken Williams. The opinions, attitudes, thoughts, and ideas that we discuss are those of the hosts and guests and are not necessarily a reflection of the actual doctrines of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Thanks for listening. And enjoy this week's conversation. I just realized I didn't have my microphone on. I don't know if I still have it on. It looks like. Is it working? I can't even tell. So let's see if this works. I'm trying something. Trying to see if I can do a live stream and record my podcast at the same time. It is multitasking at a new level. So I don't know how that's going to work. But anyways, here is Thursday afternoon, and I haven't figured out what I want to record for my episode. Well, I didn't until I was looking through some of my Facebook memories, which I only have really one memory that showed up for today. And it is today, as I'm recording this, Thursday, the 16th of November, which is a significant day because it is Edison's birthday. He's super excited about that. Happy birthday, Edison. And I've not seen him today. I've been gone for the last several days and have not seen him. And I haven't seen him since Friday, I think. Saturday morning, I left early and got back late last night. Well, I got back early enough to go to work last night. And he went to school, and then he's on the tech crew for their school musical. So I haven't seen him. So happy birthday. I may text him. I'm not for close family, friends, stuff like that. I'm not the biggest fan of texting my happy birthday wishes because I think he deserves more than that. And I'll probably do something nice like take him on a cruise. Oh, I already did that. I may take him out to dinner or something, breakfast. We'll do something nice. But as I was looking through my Facebook memories, something popped up that I had not thought about. I knew it was I knew it was his birthday and it was the anniversary of his birth, but I had not thought about the fact that 17 years ago today was a really difficult day. And that is because I got a phone call from my wife. This is back before cell phones were ubiquitous. There's my college word for the day. And the call that I got was that she was out delivering newspapers. I was home taking care of Carissa and Dalton were the ones at home. And Marcine called me and said, I can't see. So I knew something was not right. I rushed to get the kids ready, took them to go find her. And this is what I came across. So if if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook Live, there's a picture of our van. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read what I wrote. Memories are distinct, but they're also fallible. And so what I did, and I haven't even looked to see when I wrote this. This was the next day, November 17th. So 17 years ago tomorrow, I wrote kind of a summary of what happened. I've not read this in several years. So I don't, there's some things I remember absolutely that happened. This is the email that I sent to my family. I'm going to read it. I'm just going to react to it. And I'm going to share just some thoughts about gratitude and how it relates to, I've not done the gratitude challenge that a lot of people do this time of year for a lot of reasons. One of them is just my own attitude. And not that I am not grateful, but it's, I don't know that I want Thanksgiving to be my reason to express gratitude. So it's not. So here we go. This is the email that I sent to my family. This is taking me back in ways that I didn't know I was going to go. I said, thank you for your thoughts and prayers. Thanks, Mom, for being the center of attention. I had my mom kind of being the focus point so that I wasn't getting inundated with questions from all my siblings and questions and then having to answer the same questions over and over again. I said, thanks for being the communication center or whatever. Here's the story. I'll try to give you the details that you're craving. Thursday morning. This is the night before this accident. Here's the story. Thursday morning, 1 o'clock or so, Marcine sat up in bed, complained of a pounding headache. I ended up giving her a blessing because nothing seemed to help. She took some ibuprofen, but she couldn't keep it down. She finally fell asleep in the recliner. She has had difficult pregnancies, and this was no exception. And but usually in the third trimester, she was 8 months pregnant. Things were not too bad, other than she complained about not being able to breathe. So when I woke up at about 6:30 in the morning, she said that her finally had stopped hurting and she went back to sleep. I got the kids off to school, including driving Allison because she missed the bus. That seems to be something that we experienced a lot with Allison. I got home, Marcine was up. She tried to drink some juice, but she also could not keep that down. She had a piece of toast. That seemed to be okay. So we were talking later. As I wrote this, I said we were talking yesterday about how blessed we felt because Marcine had been asked to deliver some extra newspapers this week, and she felt well enough to get started. I was still at home because Carissa complained of a sore throat this morning. I kept her home from school and decided to stay with Carissa and Dalton so that Marcine could make some progress on the 700 or so papers that she had to deliver today. At 10:50 this morning, Marcine called me. She said, I'm seeing flashes of light. I can't see my papers, and the paper I think she was talking about was the paper that said what houses, what neighborhoods she was supposed to be delivering papers in. I can't see my papers, but I can see the road. Can you come and drive me around my route? I told her that I would be there as soon as I can get Carissa and Dalton ready. Of course, finding shoes and socks and coats, that was the biggest challenge. Marcine told me that she would meet me in the church parking lot, which was just 3 miles from our house. I couldn't reach her. Once I left home, I tried to call her. Could not reach her to let her know that I was coming. So I drove around the church parking lot. She was not there. So I went on to the neighborhood where she said she was delivering papers. It was a few blocks away. I did not know the neighborhood well. I entered the neighborhood trying to call her cell phone, and I did not see her. About 3 blocks in, I saw several emergency vehicles, 3 police cars, fire truck, ambulance, a couple of other trucks with flashing lights. My first thought was, something's happened to Marcine. The road was blocked. I could not get through, so I looked around to see if I could find her or our car or anything that might prove me right or wrong. I saw a car that didn't look familiar, so I was relieved, and I started to turn around. I remember thinking, whatever's going on in that house, I'm so sorry for them, but I got to go find my wife. As I backed up, my line of sight changed, and there was a different car that people were focused on. And I'll put that back up. Unfortunately, it was our van, and it was in the front yard of a house, a little too close to the brick facade. I told Dalton and Carissa to wait in the car, and I ran up to see what was going on. The jaws of life were on the front lawn, and that's never a good sign. With HIPAA laws, people are not very willing to share medical details. I knew that going in, so I didn't get much other than questions about Marcine's medical history. I remember as I ran up towards the car, I was stopped by a police officer who said, is she diabetic? No, she's not diabetic. Does she have seizures? No, she doesn't have seizures. And it seems that he left, another officer came up. Is she diabetic? No, she's not diabetic. Does she have seizures? No, doesn't have seizures. And then as he left, the third one came up asking the same questions. Is she diabetic? No, she's not diabetic. Does she have seizures? No. And I finally thought to tell them that she is 8 months pregnant. She has no history of no history of diabetes, no history of seizures. So I did let him know the story up to this point, and I did explain. I think that she had a pounding headache. A firefighter came up to me. This is a part that I've forgotten. He came up to me at that point and said that she had been unconscious up until about 5 minutes before our conversation. She was not complaining about any pain, but they thought her ankle was broken. Well, yeah, the bone sticking through her skin probably was a good indicator of that. They told me what hospital they were taking her to, and because they would be using lights and sirens, they told me not to keep up. I spent a few minutes talking to the homeowner, who seemed genuinely concerned about Marcine. The homeowner happened to be home for lunch. And she said, I think I must be the only one in the neighborhood who's home. She pointed to a few houses around her. She said they're always home, but nobody was home. She told me how frustrated it was waiting for the ambulance to arrive. She called 911, and said, "There's a woman who's passed out in my front yard." And it took way too long in her mind. Marcine was unconscious, and the homeowner felt completely helpless. That street where she hit the house was on the same street as the man who hired Marcine to deliver the newspaper. So I stopped by his house to let him know that Marcine would not be finishing the round. She'll be in the hospital. I then left for the hospital, made phone calls along the way, called my boss, told him I'm not coming into work. I called my parents, told them, I don't know what's going on, but here's what's going on. I called Marcine's dad, who came and picked up the kids, so that I could go straight to the hospital. By the time I arrived at the hospital, which I think was around 12:45 p.m., I hurried to the to the ER. Went to the ER. And of course, the parking lot I found was on the opposite side of the hospital. So I had to navigate some series of mazes asking directions along the way to find the ER. And I finally got there. There always seemed to be a line with anybody that I needed to ask. In the emergency room, the admitting clerk asked how she could help me. And I said, "I think my wife is here." She asked for a name. When I answered, she said, "Oh, yeah, wait here. I'll be right back." And I remember saying, I remember her asking the name. And I said, "Marcine," thinking Marcine is such an uncommon, unusual name that for sure she's going to recognize the name. Yes, she's here. And she looked at me super confused. Marcine what? Williams. Last name, super common, but that triggered it for her. And she said, yes, she's here. I'll be right back. So that's never a good sign. And she went back behind the double doors, didn't come back for several minutes. And that also not a good sign. So then two people came back to the front. They were dressed in white lab coats. They came back from the restricted access doors, and the man introduced himself. "Hi, Mr. Williams. My name is Alan. Come back here with me." He didn't tell me he was the chaplain, but I could see on his coat, it said Alan, chaplain. Still not a good sign. He took me into a room, invited me to sit down, and he started asking questions about Marcine and what happened, what I knew. And so I told him the story that I knew, which is pretty much what I have told you. He finally said, "Well, first, I guess I should congratulate you. You have a beautiful baby boy." And that's not exactly what I was planning on. He was about 5 weeks early, but I did figure that probably would be a result of the accident. I wasn't for sure, but I assumed. He said he's got quite a set of lungs on him, which was a concern that I had. And he looks like you. It's always good to hear. And I asked, because all of our kids had a lot of hair. So I asked, "Does he have any hair?" "Yes, he's got lots of hair." So we had to get that important stuff out of the way. He said, "I'm not a doctor, so I can't give you any information on the condition of your wife or baby. But once we get the ER doctor down here, he'll be able to answer your questions." I still hadn't heard anything about Marcine, so I was a little bit concerned. So as I'm sitting there in this room that's just surrounded by chairs and couches, a firefighter stepped in and handed me a cup of water. He said, "You may need this." And I thought, how bad is this going to be? A few minutes later, the ER doc came in and started asking some of the same questions that Alan had asked. I told the same story. And finally, he said that she was stable but unconscious. He also mentioned that he had a question. He asked, "Is she a Mormon?" I said, "Yes, she is." And he said, "Well, you had a Melchizedek priesthood holder working on her today." He explained that as they were talking to Marcine, as she came into the emergency room, she had another seizure. They said that she was not doing well. They had previously checked her out. She was doing well. Baby was doing well. But during the seizure, it was clear that the baby was not handling the pregnancy well. So they had to do an emergency C-section. There happened to be, and I put that in air quotes, happened to be an OB doctor in another room in the emergency room. So she came over quickly. She was right there. And she was able to immediately deliver Edison. So Doc said he had a rough start, but he and your wife were stable. You'll get to see them in a few minutes. So that's the first time I really understood that they were both alive. I remember Alan telling me that as soon as the ER doc comes and talks to you, then we'll get you up to the NICU and you can see your son. But first, ER doc will come in here. He'll tell you what happened to your wife. That was not fun. But when the doctor told me that I had a Melchizedek priesthood holder working on her, I just was filled with peace. I just knew it didn't matter what was going to come out next. It was going to be okay. So I realized, back to what I wrote. Okay, so they're both alive. That's a good start. They took me back to the ER, which was also set up to function as an operating room. They warned me that there was a lot of blood, and there was. They were concerned that she might need a transfusion because she'd lost so much blood from the C-section. They were also concerned that the baby might need a transfusion, and that's something I had forgotten about. They handed me a bag of her belongings, which included her cell phone, wallet, and sunglasses. Later, they called me down for another bag with her shoes, which had the tongue cut out, and her glasses, which were bent, probably from getting hit by the airbag. Next, they took me up to the NICU. I was able to see Edison. He looked great, just over 4 pounds. I think he was 4 pounds, half an ounce. They let me feed him his first bottle. He'll be there until he can maintain his own body temperature, which may be up to a week. The pediatrician thinks that he's doing well enough that he won't need to stay there for too long. Since there wasn't much I could do at this point, I started making phone calls. Then the visit started. So Jan came, Marcine's mom. She brought Allison and Brendan. They got to see both Marcine and the baby. Marcine was, I think she was still unconscious at this point. Stephanie and Christian came, and they spent, great friends, spent the next 6.5 hours with me, making sure that I paid attention to what the doctors said. I got information from the doctors about what treatment she was going to have, what surgery she was going to need. This is now probably 4 or 5 in the afternoon. 6 o'clock, I think, is when I met with the doctor. And when they were coming over, Christian and Stephanie asked, "Are you hungry?" And I realized I'm starving. I hadn't had anything to eat. So they brought me some food. It was fantastic. So the surgeon who worked on Marcine's foot found me in the NICU. He said that the same bone in both ankles was broken, and one was compound. So she has 2 screws in that bone holding it together, and she would have 6 to 8 weeks recovery. Ligaments were all torn. He also had to repair that. The other ankle did not need to be surgically repaired. He said she did very well, and she should be able to put some weight on her right ankle after a few weeks. At about 8 p.m. that night, she started to come out of sedation. One doctor said that she'd be sedated all night, and another said they'd let her wake up. She was on a ventilator. Waking up was not enjoyable for her. She was still in a fog, and when she realized there was something shoved down her throat, she was intubated. She started acting like she couldn't breathe, like she was gagging. And since we both know sign language, she was signing to me that she felt like she couldn't breathe. She finally settled down enough and woke up enough for them to be able to take her off the ventilator and remove the tube. Over the next couple of hours, we gave her another blessing. She got to hold the baby. She became more aware of what was going on. She's talking. She's uncomfortable. Just as I was leaving, one of the OB docs asked what happened in the car. Marcine remembers calling me, and she remembers the flashes of light, but she couldn't remember anything else. She thought she'd stopped driving at that point, but she was stopped on the side of the road. Car was in drive instead of in park. And so as she had the seizure, foot slipped off the brake. She just, I think, traveled right towards the house. It was interesting. She knew there was an accident. She knew that there was she knew she wasn't pregnant anymore. And she was very insistent that she wanted to see Edison. So that's the story. That's what happened 17 years ago today. And so as I wrote this, I wrote, I can hardly believe how blessed we are. So I just list some of the blessings, and I'm sure there are more. I was home. Marcine, I was home, meaning in the morning. Marcine was able to call me when she started having it was an eclamptic seizure, the flashes of light, high blood pressure. She was aware enough to tell me where she was. The homeowner of the house that she hit was home. The home was not severely damaged. There's cosmetic damage. It was all covered by insurance. The ER doc is LDS. OB was right where she needed to be to do a quick C-section. In fact, she told me that they called people in, come see this. You're never going to see another C-section in the emergency room. And both Marcine and Edison, still 17 years later, they're doing great. So there you go. That was what happened 17 years ago today. That is something that I'm grateful for. And there you go. Thanksgiving time, Thanksgiving season is a time for us to be grateful. And there are things to be grateful for. So be grateful. Express gratitude. Let people know what kind of impact, positive impact they have in your life. If you don't tell them, how are they going to know? So that's all I got. Let's make it the end of the podcast. So thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Chocolate Cake Bites. Please like, share, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating and review. We'd love to hear your comments and ideas, and you can reach out to me at ken@chocolatecakebites.com. And before you end the day, take a few minutes to consider, who do you know who needs chocolate cake?